So, friends, welcome to this class of geomorphology, and in this class we will deal with weathering and soil formation. What does it mean? Is weathering important for you? And if it is important, then why it is important? Does weathering affect your daily life? Does weathering affect your food production? Does weathering affect our neighborhood relationship? Does weathering affect our heritage site? So, in this class we will deal all these subjects and we will try to answer all those questions with suitable examples. So, before proceeding to this class of weathering, now look at these four photographs. The left hand side, this is the weathering topography. Mostly it is found in the Yamuna river bank. It is called Chambal and the Chambal valley, and this is representing this bedland topography. It is simply a weather zone, it is chemically weather zone or physically weather zone. What is chemically weather zone and physically weather zone we will discuss in the later times, but overall if you see this photograph, it is a topography which is undulating, it is not plain. Similarly, the second photograph if you see here, the right hand side, this photograph represents a weather topography of a limestone terrain, and we know the limestone, it is mostly this is chemically very vulnerable for weathering compared to siliciclastic rocks like sandstone. This limestone is chemically very vulnerable to weathering. That is why most of this weather topography in the limestone region is found due to chemical weathering. And the third photograph, this corner one, it is a weathered profile of a hard rock, it is of quartzite which contains iron. That means, if you remove this weathered product, if you remove this metamorphic effect, earlier it was a ferruginous sandstone and finally due to weathering it forms a quartzite and which is iron leached, that is why red color is appearing. And the fourth one, this right hand corner in the bottom, this is a part of the hill slope which is weathered due to mass wasting. So, now the question arises, if these are the weather topographies and all these weather topography, they represent different type of weathering, different agents are involved in the weathering of these topographies. So, that means now we should have a topography and we should have a weathering agent. Due to this weathering agent, either physically or chemically, biologically or in combination of both, this topography are getting peneplaned. So, if you remember our earlier classes when we are talking about the Davis geomorphic cycle, Davis geomorphic cycle says in a time span the mountain building takes place and within a large time span these mountains get eroded and finally it reaches up to the base level. So, in this weathering topography there are different level of weathering and erosion has been taken place and finally at some part of the process they are reaching to. So, to explain all those things, let us consider again four photographs. The left handed side photograph, this is part of our Indian continent, it is the east coast of India and near to Visakhapatnam, here it is mentioned near to Visakhapatnam, it is the granitic rock, it is intrusive rock, and we know the intrusive rock they form at considerable higher temperature and pressure below the earth crust some kilometer below, and once they reach to the surface they are not vulnerable to withstand the reduced temperature and pressure. That is why they try to weather. This weather again either it is physically or chemically, that we will discuss in later classes, but in this particular photograph if you see there are certain lines, they are not lines actually, they are the layers, different layers. That means I want to say the granite which is exposed at the eastern boundary of this Indian subcontinent near to Visakhapatnam in the Eastern Ghat region, they are weathering or they are removing the material layer wise. So, there is a layer type of removal of material from this rock. The second photograph, if you see here, this one, this is 2, if I assign it 2 number, this is a photograph of basalt. It is an extrusive igneous rock. So, extrusive igneous rocks, that means it formed at the surface temperature and pressure condition. When the magma pours out from this mantle, from the subsurface level, it forms basalt, mostly it is mafic rock. And now you see, here is a clear line demarcating a boundary. What this line means? Below this line, the rocks or the basalt, it is unweathered or relatively less weathered. But if you consider the upper part of this photograph, you see there are mostly rounded parts, they are the mostly rounded part, and within the rounded part you will see there will be cabbage like appearance. So, that means there is a cabbage type of weathering, there is layer type of weathering which is spheroidal, this is called typically, this is called spheroidal weathering. So, spheroidal weathering, it is typically found in the basalt, and if you see there cabbage like layer of rock that is getting removed. Now, the third photograph here, the third photograph is also from this Visakhapatnam coast, and you see this is Bay of Bengal and this side is the continent, and this rock representing khondalites. Khondalites, you know, it is silmonite bearing rock which is metamorphic rock, and this you find this, the main theme of showing this figure is here, if you see it is a natural bridge. Natural bridge is due to weathering only. And the fourth photograph, it is of Talcher sandstone from Gondwana, it is from Maharashtra also. Now, you see there are groups and ridges. So, these groups and ridges may be due to weathering either in a glacial environment, but this is due to chemical weathering of a calcareous sandstone. So, now I want to say there are 4 photographs of different part of the Indian subcontinent. It is showing different type of weathering of different type of rocks. So, that means I want to say we have different agents, they are spatially and temporally working 24/7 to make the rock peneplane and to make the surface down. So, this total system either it is occurring physically, simply breaking down of rock, or it is occurring chemically, that means with the chemical reaction with the reagents, the atmospheric reagent or water or some acids like that, or it is biologically, that means either the involvement of the human being, either involvement of the any organism, either bacteria, the involvement of these trees, whatever may be. So, that is why either physically, chemically or biologically the rocks are getting weathered and their shape is continuously changing, it has to be remembered here. Because if you remove the weathering effect from this rock, the rock was somewhat differently behaving, and this weathering before, when the formation of this basalt, there was no spheroidal weathering. During formation of this granite, there was no layer type of discontinuous there existing. So, during formation of this khondalite, there was no this natural bridge occurring, or during formation of the sandstone, there is no groove and ridge structures. So, that means these structures, they are later imposed to the rock due to some agents which are called weathering agents. Now, the earth surface is ever changing, that means no two part of the earth surface are same. There are evidence of paleogeographic changes throughout the geological past. It is very important to notice here, there are very evidences of paleogeographic changes. Paleogeographic changes, that means if you consider our Indian context only. In Indian context, if we remove 55 million years from this geological time scale, we will not find the existence of Himalayas in the northern part. So, instead we will find this occurrence of an ocean that is called Tethys Ocean. Now, imagine when Tethys Ocean was existing in the northern part, the rivers which are originating from the central part of the India, they might have debauching their sediments to this Tethys Ocean. So, that means earlier a ocean was existing, there was a geographically depressed part existing, but now due to this collision of Indian and Eurasian continent, now this Tethys Ocean modified gradually and finally it is converted to Himalayas. So, this is paleogeographic changes. Similarly, if you consider the coastal parts, in the coastal part if you remove 10,000 years from the geological time scale, you go to the Holocenes. In the Holocene there was, at the end of this Holocene was marked due to the deglaciation. So, when glaciation was there, the whole earth surface was glaciated. All this continental part, it is occupied by glacier ice. So, that is why this ocean level, the mean sea level was much below, say 100 meters below at the present time. So, when the sea was 100 meter below at the present sea level, so rivers whatever they are taking their sediments, they are debauching at the deeper part of this ocean, deeper part of this bay, deeper part of the sea. So, now due to increase of sea level, this sediments which was deposited by the river, then they are submerged. And finally, a fluvial environment or a deltaic environment which was existing 10,000 years back, now it is reoccupied by the marine environment. And finally, if we further increase the sea level, this fluvial environment again will retreat back to continent ward and the marine environment again encroach to the continent ward. So, that means it is a paleogeographic changes, how the geography was distributed, how the different agents are distributed, because in the paleogeographic condition all these weathering agents, either it is river or it is glacier or it is wind or many other agents also, they have their restricted environment, and those restricted environment they are different setups. So, one environment if it is encroaching to different environment, that means it is clear indicating there is a change of paleogeography. Similarly, in the earth crust, there are many times it has been noticed, we have geological evidences, we have paleontological evidences, we have geographical evidences, there are many other evidences also available, that it says there is change in land and sea distribution in geological past. For example, if you see here 225 million years ago, this was the land and sea distribution, 200 million years ago this was the land and sea distribution, 135 million years ago the land and sea distribution was huge, and 65 million years ago this was the land and sea distribution, and this is the present day land and sea distribution. That means I want to say from present day to 225 million years, if we analyze, we compare the land and sea distribution, you will find a huge change. And once the land and sea distribution changes, the environment changes, the climate changes, the geographic position of one agent changes, to other agent it is occupied. So, that means I want to say with the change of paleogeography, the weathering agents or the agents which are continuously working to penetrate the earth surface, their domain also restricted. That is why paleogeographic changes with time, it refers to the change of weathering agents one domain to another domain. Different places are dominated by different geologic agents and the style of working is different. It is very important to say. The style of working is also important. For example, we say we consider here three weathering agents, one is river, one is wind, one is glacier. They are the three prominent weathering agents. Glaciers, it is occupied at the higher latitude and higher altitude. For example, the Indian context if we say, glacier mostly at the higher Himalayan systems. So, their domain is restricted there and their style of working is also different. By looking a valley, by looking a sediment, by looking a erosional topography or by looking a depositional system, we can predict which type of geological agents is involved for their formation, because their style of working is different. A river, it creates V-shaped valley, in glacier it creates U-shaped valley, is not it? a glacier which cuts up to the deeper part of this earth crust, but river cannot, a wind cannot. Similarly, a wind which produces more fine materials, very highly rounded, highly texturally matured material. However, if you see the glacier, it will be highly angular fragments, highly texturally immature, mineralogically immature, and compared to the river part, it will considerable somewhat better than this glacier. It will create a valley which is considerable depth, which will produce sediments which are mineralogically relatively more mature than glacier. So, that means I want to say we have different agents, they are continuously working, but their style of working is different. So, that is why by looking the topography, by looking their product, process and products relationships we are talking, by the looking the products we can say what are the processes involved in their formation. So, that is why the style of working of different agents are different in terms of weathering is concerned. And this weathering, some of these weathering parts, some of these weathering agents, the work somehow they are slowly, and some of these weathering agents they work very fast. For example, water, wind, chemical agent, gravity, they are the slower processes, but there are exceptions. For example, water, suppose for consider water, river water, it is flowing for millions of years, for thousands of years, lakhs of years. So, it is carrying out sediment, it is transporting sediment from one place to another. Average sedimentation of an area per annually, it is few millimeter per year, it is a slow process, but exceptions are there. For example, Kedarnath strategy, or there is a flash flood in the upper reaches, it will create meters of sediments within a minute or within an hour. So, that means though this water system it is a slow process, but there are exceptions. Within that exception you will find the fast process within that. Similarly, wind erosion, it is a slow process. To peneplane a system, the wind takes millions of years, but exceptions are also there. There will be dust bowls, there will be dust winds that will create huge sediment within a minute or second. Similarly, chemical agents, it is a slow process. Gravity, though it is a slow process, but sometimes landslides, gravitational failure, within a minute it will change the topography, whole topography can be changed within a minute or hour. And some of the fast processes are there, like landslides. Landslide, it is a fast process, very fast. If you see your this previous slide here, the landslide, it is here. Within a minute, within an hour, whole system will be changed, whole topography will change. Then tectonic forces, they are fast process, though they are considered sometimes it is slow process, because tectonic movement 5 centimeter per year, 3 centimeter per year, 2 centimeter per year, but at certain process there are certain events sometimes occur that will change the topography. Nepal earthquake, huge fractures within a minute. So, some of these weathering agents they work very slowly and some of them work very fast, but exceptions are always there. So, what is their product? If they are working 24/7 either slowly or fastly, this leads the change in geography of any region, this change the geography. They always try to peneplane, because nature never wants its surface to become rough. It always wants by their agents to change the surface, to peneplane the surface 24/7. For example, here 3 photographs are given. One is 1890, you see these mounds within this sea, and 1910, that means after 20 years, here see the size of the mound, and 1970 after 60 years, you see the size of the mound. The place remains same, the agent remains same, but the topography size gradually decreasing. So, that means I want to say in a place these processes and products, they vary with time, or the process remains same, the size of the product vary with time. That means, gradually these weathering processes, they are working 24/7 to make the system peneplain. From huge mound, gradually it decreases size, again gradually it decreases. If it is noticed further, suppose in 2019, probably this mound would not have been here. So, that means, this is a gradual process. These geomorphic systems, they are working to make the system peneplain, to change the geography. And if this is so, now the question arises, the what scale this weathering process works. Scale means, you see, the weathering process, it starts from small grains and it changes the geography. That means, from minute, from the tiny size to regional size. So, if you see here, for example, it is a wall constituted of bricks. Now, after hundreds of years, you see the situation of the bricks, and finally, what are their products? Product is soil, grains, small grains, the grains that will be transported from here, that will be removed from here and deposit somewhere else, that will be a part of this soil formation process. So, that means, this weathering, though it is working 24/7, its scale, it can be of tiny size to scale of mountain size or scale of regional scales. So, that is why the weathering do not bound itself within an environment. Now, the process by which the rock of the earth gets disintegrated and decomposed are called weathering. This is very important. The process by which the rocks of the earth gets disintegrated and decomposed. There are two things here to be understood. Disintegration, that means simply breaking without change its composition, but decomposition means it change its composition. The first part, only the physically the size is reduced without changing its composition, without changing its mineralogy. But in the second case, decomposition, here the size may reduced and the composition may reduced. So, that is why weathering not only confined only the size reduction, weathering also involves the compositional change. So, this weathering which is responsible for composition change, it is called chemical weathering, and which is involved only disintegration, size reduction, this is called physical weathering or mechanical weathering. So, irrespective of its process, irrespective either it is physically or it is chemically or in the combination of both, the process by which rocks of this earth crust gets disintegrated or decomposed, that is called weathering. And weathering is the first step of rock cycle. Rock cycle, if you see here, this is the very nice figure. Here you see in the rock cycle we consider three types of rocks: igneous rocks that also get weathered, metamorphic rock get weathered, sedimentary rock get weathered. So, the weathered product, what will be the product? This product will be soil. So, that means irrespective of the rock types, if it is getting weathered, that is decomposing or disintegrating. So, this decomposed product or disintegrated product, that is giving the product of weathering, and finally, it is the soil. In the initial when started with class, we were discussing whether this weathering it is affecting our daily to daily life. Yes, it is affecting. How? Weathering, it controls our food production. Weathering controls our soil quality. Weathering controls whether what type of soil, either the soil will retain water within it or not. So, that means when the soil property is getting changed, the crop property also getting changed. So, our daily life, our food quality, our food production, what we will consume daily, that is also defined by weathering only. Similarly, we have different mineral resources like bauxite deposit in east coast Khondalites, bauxite deposit in Maharashtra, that is in basalt, copper deposit, Rajpur Dariba. So, all those products, this is due to weathering only. Similarly, the soil on which we are doing our agriculture, it is a product of weathering. The terracotta, this is a product of weathering. So, had weathering not been there, so that means the rock is fresh, not weathered, no soil. So, the barren rock body would have been there, and finally, barren rock, that means no vegetation, no cultivation, no crop, no food, no existence of the life. So, that means weathering, it is a good factor for our food production, our soil quality management. So, that is why weathering, it is affecting our daily life. National economy, yes, national economy it is affecting. How? That few minutes back we are talking about our mineral resource. Mineral resource, that means we are adding our wealth to the national property. So, had weathering not been there, there would not have been any bauxite deposit in either it is in Gandhamardan, it is in Eastern Ghat, or it is in the basalt of Maharashtra. So, due to weathering it happened, it is possible. Similarly, China clay deposit, China clay deposit is a product of weathering, is not it? Feldspars and other rocks, they are chemically leached, chemically weathered, and finally, the product of is China clay. Similarly, copper deposit, it is a product of chemical weathering. So, we will talk about the mineralization and weathering, we will talk in detail. Here I want to say weathering affects our daily life, weathering affects our national economy, weathering affects our crop production, weathering affects our food consumptions. So, all these things they are affected by this geological process which is called weathering. So, this is the first step of rock cycle. Now, if you see here the igneous, extrusive igneous rocks, it is getting weathered, transported, deposited and create sediment, lithification and sedimentary rocks. Similarly, the metamorphic rock, it is get weathered, again the same process continues and finally it creates sedimentary rock. Intrusive igneous rocks, it get weathered and finally this due to weathering again through same process it creates metamorphic rock. So, that means I want to say either it is extrusive igneous rock, intrusive igneous rock, metamorphic rock, sedimentary rock, all those types of rocks get weathered with time and the product is our soil development. More this weathering, more thicker the soil and more mineral constituents that accumulates in the soil, making the soil more fertile. So, this is the product of weathering, advantages of weathering. So, except minor surface roughening, weathering alone does not make landforms, mind it. Weathering alone does not make landforms. So, what is associated with weathering? It provides only the broken rock. So, that means there is another agent which is associated with weathering, that is called erosion. So, weathering and erosion, they combinedly work together to make the earth surface peneplain. Weathering itself is not able to do it, because weathered products, that if I discuss this difference between weathering and erosion, weathering is the only disintegration or decomposition, it is in situ. That means, the product that remains at the same place, but as far as erosion is concerned, erosion removes the material from the weathering site. So, it is removes means it is a considerable distance, it is a considerable distance. So, this is called erosion. So, weathering alone is not responsible for landform development or landform modification, it is weathering and erosion both are simultaneously working together to make the surface peneplain. Now, if you see here this the diagram, this is weathered mantle and it is temporary stream is there, then granite boulders are there. So, in the next class we will talk about how this granite get weathered and what are those products this form and how these products are removed from this place and how the landforms are formed due to erosion, how the landforms are formed due to weathering, and in the detail we will discuss in the next class. Thank you.